Shalom, shalom, shalom. Welcome, O Yasharal, set apart awakening nation. Welcome to Return of the Promised Land, to the Promised Land Judgment Series. My name is Symmanayah, if you're tuning in for the first time. This segment represents the 24th installment of the Judgment Series, and is centered around the words, the seed of Abraham. My brothers and sisters, as we walk this journey in these earthen vessels, our experiences on many occasions have led us to ignore the power of the seed, where life began for us in set apartness. We often perceive ourselves as growing and sometimes stronger than what we are, stronger than our true condition. This will one day change sooner than we realize. The most recent recordings that I have published drew attention to things that we all too often have taken for granted, such as water and bread. If we search the scriptures, there are instructions regarding the need to remind ourselves of things in times past. The need to discern the importance of remembering is a criteria to ensure that we will not repeat the mistakes of our past or the mistakes of our forefathers. If you were to visit John 14:26, of which I mention often, referencing how Yahuah sent his set-apart spirit in Yahusha's name to teach us, I want to draw your attention to the word remind that is also in this passage. Though literally this message was speaking to his direct taught ones that was in his presence, it also means that the spirit of Yahusha, the spirit of Yahuah sent in Yahusha's name, will bring things to our remembrance for the purpose of nurturing us, for the purpose in helping us to grow into maturity, for the purposes of strengthening our walk forward. Now, if you also visit Revelations chapter 2 and 3, you would discover that in the 5th verse of the 2nd chapter, and in Revelation the 3rd chapter, the 3rd verse, in other words, Revelation 2:5 and 3:3, there's a call to remember. You see, my brothers and sisters, I want to strongly emphasize the need to discern the life and all that is written regarding the seed of Abraham. I'm compelled to believe it is critical to coming together for an awakening nation in unity, for us to know what is the full meaning regarding the seed of Abraham. I believe discerning what is promised regarding the seed of Abraham will aid in adapting and adjusting to the things that must occur during the emergence of the 144,000 Hebrews and 12 tribes mentioned in Revelation 7 chapter. You see, my brothers and sisters, it begins with a seed, and then the seed bud, and then we watch as it flourish. The seed, for this is where the original DNA, the original instructions originate. I also believe a great multitude will accompany the 144,000 that we will witness rise up in the coming days. Allow me to present more as I state my case regarding the seed of Abraham. I'm compelled to believe those who are the children of Yahuah will grow to believe unwaveringly that our spirit will live forever with Yahusha, our sovereign, commonly known as King. I believe there will be no problems as we mature in accepting that our spirit takes priority over our earthen vessels. I have presented messages on my position on this matter on many occasions. How many of us have heard the term, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And many people say we don't know the answer. I'm going to elaborate on that in a moment. My brothers and sisters, ask yourself, ask others that you know who seek to do the will of the Almighty Father. Is the seed of Abraham about race and culture? Or is the seed of Abraham about worship and obedience, about serving the Most High? Many of us have heard people say at some point in time, if we remove our skin, we all have the same color, blood, and flesh beneath. Do you agree? Pray, my brothers and sisters, for what I'm suggesting, my brothers and sisters, is that the seed of Abraham is the spirit to do the will of the Almighty Father, passed on from generations to generation, a result of those who are drawn by Abba Yahuah, the Almighty Father, to Yahusha Mashiach. For it is through him that we receive salvation. For no man can come unto the Father except through him. Yahusha, the word of Yahuah made flesh, the spirit of Yahuah sent in Yahusha's name. There are no doubts in my mind that we will discern the meaning of the seed of Abraham. No doubts, my brothers and sisters. I think it's a necessity. And as we find ourselves disciplined and refined, we will not take it for granted soon. We will realize that it is part of the strength that gives us the fortitude to press on into these end times. I want to share with you, my brothers and sisters, that I believe that the chicken came before the egg. But what I want to do is use a plant instead of the chicken. In other words, the plant came before the seed. I'm compelled to believe that this is how it began. Consider this. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 11 and 12, and the Almighty One said, let the earth bring forth grass and the plant that yields seeds. The plant that yields seeds, stating that the plant came before the seed. And the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth. And it came to be so, and the earth brought forth grass, the plant that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And the Almighty One saw that it was good. Genesis chapter 1, verse 11 and 12. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. And Yahuah, the Almighty One, formed the man out of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostril breath of life, and man became a living being. If you are able to discern the life in what I just read, clearly the plant came before the seed and man came before his seed. Now let us take a brief look about Abraham, the seed of Abraham. Let's take a look at some things here, my brothers and sisters. I want you to come with me to Genesis 17th chapter, and let us read verses 3 through 9. Reads as follows, and Abram fell on his face, and the Almighty One spoke with him, saying, as for me, look, my covenant is with you, and you shall become a father of many nations. And no longer is your name called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, because I shall make you a father of many nations, and I shall make you bear fruit exceedingly, and make nations of you, and sovereigns shall come from you. And I shall establish my covenant between me and you and your seed. Singular. I'm saying singular. I'm adding the word singular to that. And you will see that it speaks of that later on in the scriptures. But let me go back to read what it says. Between me and you and your seed after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be the Almighty One to you and your seed after you. And I shall give you and your seed after you the land of your sojourning, all the land of Canaan. And as an everlasting possession, I shall be their Almighty One. And the Almighty One said to Abraham, as for you, guard my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout their generation. Yasharal. Oh, Yasharal, although I just read a brief description of an encounter between Abraham and the Almighty Father, can we not agree that Abraham indeed found favor with the Almighty Father? He found favor such that generations to come and generations that have come and gone, Abraham's seed continues to flourish. He found favor such that we see that the promised land is still intact, meaning it is there. And I believe that the final gathering of Yasharal from the four corners of the earth before the physical return of Yahushua Mashiach will prove that we will return to the promised land, the land that was promised to Abraham and his seed. My brothers and sisters, I would like to also add the following. Exodus 32:13 says, remember Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yasharal, your servants to whom you swore by yourself and said to them, I increase your seed like the stars of the heavens, and all this land that I have spoken of I give to your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. That was Exodus 32:13. Proverbs 11:21 says, hand to hand the evil one does not go unpunished, but the seed of the righteous shall escape. Now let me take you to Matthew chapter 13, verse 24 through 30. It reads as follows. Another parable he put before them, saying, the rain of the heavens has become like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed darnel among the wheat and went away. And when the blade sprouted and bore fruit, then the darnel also appeared. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in the field? For where then does it have this darnel? And he said to them, a man, an enemy, did this. And the servant said to him, do you wish then that we go and gather them up? He said, no, least while you gather up the darnel, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest, I shall say to the reapers, first gather the darnel and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my granary. My brothers and sisters, we will see what that means in the coming days. You see, this is not saying, as Yasharal is gathered, let the wicked be among us, let us not cast anyone out. He is putting emphasis that wait, and he shall say to the reapers, wait to listen to his voice, because I assure you there will be times of purging, there will be times of coming away, there will be times of being set apart. But there will be some darnel, some tares, goats, so to speak. There will be some that will mimic. They will copy the behaviors of set apart children, and they will be in our midst. And those will be the ones that would face the final separation from the set apart ones. But this is not giving license to continue to parade around and compromising camps, fellowships, or groups. Let me continue on the matter of seed of Abraham. Acts 3:35 says, you are the sons of the prophets and of the covenant which the Almighty One made with our fathers, saying to Abraham, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Genesis 22:18 says, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed because you have obeyed my voice. Listen to this criteria here. Obeyed his voice. You see, those drawn of Abba Yahuah, those who obey his voice, those who seek to do his will. These are those, both Hebrews and Gentiles, who represent the seed of Abraham. Sure, we can look on the surface and we can talk about genetics and DNA and the physiological makeup of race and culture. But we will discover that it goes beyond that. It is the spirit of a man. We are not to ignore nationalities, for the scriptures talk about the return of the 12 tribes to the promised land. The scriptures talk about in the last days how 144,000 Hebrews representing 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, mentioned in Revelation 7 chapter. So we can't ignore nationality. We cannot ignore race. But let us not disregard that the seed of Abraham are all those, both Hebrews and Gentiles, who seek to do the will of the Almighty Father. Yes, it begins with a race. It begins with a culture. But the process, the road to life, is offered to any and all those who are drawn by the Almighty Father. For he created all races. And it is he who chose whom he will draw to Yahusha Mashiach, whom he will call his children, and we will learn to honor and respect the choices of Abba Father Yahuah and understand what they fully mean. Genesis 26:4-5 says, and I shall increase your seed like the stars of the heavens, and I shall give all the lands to your seed, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and guarded my charge, my commandments, my laws, my Torah. You see, my brothers and sisters, the seed of Abraham represents the obedient of Abba Yahuah. I submit to you, although nationality has its place, as I said, ultimately it's the spirit of man. We must know when to have discussions on nationalities and race, and we must know when to focus on a set-apart awakening nation beyond the skin, beyond these earthen vessels. You see, my brothers and sisters, if we put so much emphasis on the earthen vessels, we contradict ourselves. Why? Because the scriptures tell us that the flesh war against the spirit. The flesh will return back to the dust. So should we not be putting the emphasis on the spirit of a man? The seed of a man? Is it the seed of Abraham or the seed of the wicked one? Pray and watch, my brothers and sisters. Again, I'm not saying ignore race and nationality. It has its purpose. But the priority is in the spirit of a man. It is in whether that person is one who seeks to do the will of the Almighty Father. And in doing so, sure, outwardly we will see a reflection of the Spirit of your Most High in the name of Yahusha, working in us, through us, one towards another. Pray and seek to understand the meaning of this, O Yasharal. Keep in mind this journey in this body, this tabernacle, requires our spirit to manage these vessels as we are led by the Spirit of Yahuah. My brothers and sisters, in our excitement of discovering the truth regarding our nationality, we forget that it is the spirit of the person that takes priority. It would be wise not to ignore, or in other words, do not ignore nationalities. And many think that we should not talk about it because they say you're neither Greek nor Hebrew. That's bringing us to the priority. It's not saying don't think about it at all, because if you think about Revelation 7th chapter, we must be able to identify. How do we identify the process in which the Almighty Father Yahuah brought Hebrews and Gentiles together as one by Yahushua HaMashiach, if we don't acknowledge nationalities and race? And Gentiles, another word for Gentiles is Goyim, which means other nations. So you talk about, it really is saying the set apart nation of Yasharal and all other nations. And you will see out of the 12 tribes mentioned in Revelation, they will fulfill their task and they will represent each of the 12 tribes as it is written. But once done, once the merger has come all together, there would be one family, many members, one family, and that family would be under the banner, one banner, Yasharal. End times will prove that we will come to understand these matters, my brothers and sisters. Yasharal, let's consider the attributes of a natural seed. And while doing so, let us seek to discern how the life cycles of a natural seed can provide understanding and linkage to fully and better understanding the spiritual seed. What are some critical attributes of a seed? It is contained within the shell. Are not our bodies contained within, our spirits contained within these bodies? There's a DNA complete with identity and purpose, with instructions to multiply. In other words, the identity of seed. Is it an apple seed? Is it an orange seed? Is it a pomegranate seed? What type of seed is there? And that seed has instructions and know how it's supposed to flourish given the right circumstances and conditions. A seed also faces a time of death. Are we not aware of John 12:24 that says, "Truly I say unto you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." How can Abraham's seed be as the sands of the sea and as the stars in the heavens, unless there comes a time where the seed faces some death in order to bring forth life, the fruit of life? Critical needs of a seed: placement, fresh air, water, ultimately light, fertile ground, nurturing and protecting, supervision to an extent. You see, my brothers and sisters, if we look at these natural needs for a seed, natural makeups, descriptions of a seed, if we understand these dynamics, it can aid in us becoming more aware of our own anatomy, our own structure as it relates to the body and the spirit, that inward man. My brothers and sisters, I invite you to start a discussion regarding the word seed. Ask someone to tell you all they can about a seed, any seed. It is my position that most people would consider a discussion on a seed to be mundane or a waste of time. I believe the person who takes note and remembers the importance of identifying the seed and its purpose the most, the one that does that the most, that can provide the most information, represents an individual who have not taken the seed for granted, nor its purpose. I'm compelled to believe as end times become intense, as famine and pestilence become widespread, the need to understand and identify seeds that can be planted to produce food will be heightened and will become top of mind. Seed will become one of the currencies of end times. I'm compelled to believe when we keep our memories of the purpose of a seed and all that comes of a seed, it makes for a strong outcome regarding the fruit that it produces. Naturally and spiritually, it would be wise to hold on to memories of beginnings in order to process what must be done for our future. Now you might say, wow, wait a minute, he was talking about seeds, now he's saying hold on to memories. The seed, my brothers and sisters, let us not take for granted. Let us remember the seed's identity and purpose. Let us remember the instructions that were given. Let us remember what started us on this set-apart journey. And let us see how it relates to the life cycle of a seed. But in this case, let us go further and see how it is relative to the seed of Abraham. He who forgets the beginnings are at risk of repeating his mistakes of the past. Believe it or not, beginnings could include all that is behind us, yesterday and any other time before now. Things that are no longer categorized as our future becomes our history. What's behind the clock? What's behind us? Please be aware, though we may remember, memories will attempt to drag us down into self-condemnation and bring about depression. But the Most High allows us to have memories, to be aware of our histories for the purposes of not repeating mistakes of our forefathers or our own mistakes. Memories. Sometimes memories, we must step back and find out where did we slip, where did we go wrong so that we can get back on track. There's a lesson to be learned regarding our history. But let us always remember the power of the blood of the Lamb, Yahusha. How through his atoning blood, our sins are covered. Our mistakes are covered. And once they are covered, it is through his set apart living spirit that we rise up anew, renewed moment by moment. More about the seed, my brothers and sisters. Let me read Matthew chapter 13, verse 3 through 9. And he spoke to them much in parables, saying, see, the sower went out to sow. And he sowed, some indeed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. And others fell on rocky places, where they did not have much soil, and immediately sprang up, because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun was up, and they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered. And others fell among thorns, and thorns came up and choked them. And others fell on good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. My brothers and sisters, it did not say the seeds changed. And there's an explanation of this parable, and I'm going to read it. But notice he's just saying what happened to the seed. And if we look around, we see that occurring among set-apart children of Yasharal. Let me continue. Drop down to the 16th verse. I was reading Matthew 13, 3 through 9, but drop down to the 16th verse, 16 to 23. And Yahusha is quoted, and blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous ones long to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it. You then hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the rain and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is that sown by the wayside. And that sown on rocky places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but is short-lived. And when pressure and persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. And those sown among thorns is he who hears the word, and the worry of this age and the deceit of riches choke the word, and it becomes fruitless. My brothers and sisters, many of you may not realize the seed that was sown was the seed of Abraham. And you might say, well, wait a minute, the seed of Abraham lives. Yes, indeed, we do. But there are brothers and sisters who stumble and fall. There are brothers and sisters who are taken home. There are brothers and sisters. And I say this, my brothers and sisters, because it was the seed, planted a seed. Think about the origins of set apart seed. And think about the realities of life. There are those who die repenting and unrepentant, but they made a commitment to pursue. They just for some reason could not overcome physically in their flesh due to the struggle became overwhelming. And I believe the Most High took them home, took them to that place of rest. Now that there are those who are indeed wicked and evil, but I believe the scripture speaks to the set apart children of Yasharal, and this is whom we should focus. For those who are outside the set apart family of Yasharal have their judgment. And the scriptures tell us their day will come. That day will come. It would be wise to discern the life and the description of the purpose of the seed. If we are able to embrace the full purpose of the seed, we will see that it will lead to better understanding what is expected in the fulfillment of end time prophecies. What is expected regarding the promise to Abraham. My brothers and sisters, let me say this. A person thirsty, really thirsty, do you think if they just got 2 ounces of water, they'll stop? If we're truly thirsty, wouldn't we drink all the water we can until we're full? And I took this side note to emphasize that even in redundancy, it's like drinking more and more water. Even in redundancy, someone repeating himself, it's like putting more and more emphasis, reinforcing what is being said. So pray, my brothers and sisters, before you're quick to dismiss one who is repetitive, one who is redundant. My brothers and sisters, I want to also share this as I bring this segment to a close. As I awakened this day to finish preparation for this segment, I was directed to begin to outline a new series that will start when I complete the Judgment series. And that series will be part of a series that I believe is connected to Return to the Promised Land. In other words, it's related to Return to the Promised Land. It will be entitled White Robes. I'm saying this as a prelude to something to expect in the coming of days, if and only if the Spirit of the Most High confirm this by you witnessing and hearing what must be said, what will be said. Why is it necessary to say this? Because I believe that the White Robe series will put even more emphasis on the things relative to Abraham's seed. So stay tuned for that, my brothers and sisters. Your patience is requested. I believe that the Spirit of Yahusha brought clarity to the matter regarding white robes and its connection to Abraham's seed. So please pray and seek and watch to see if indeed there is something to be said as it relates to Abraham's seed, white robes, and unity for the final Exodus. Back to the subject of Abraham's seed, as we position ourselves to be ready to acknowledge our true identity and purpose as the seed of Abraham, discerning it fully, what we must do. I ask this question: are we prepared to show a reflection of set apart unity? Unity as one body, as the children of Yahuah, as the seed of Abraham? Ready or not, all that pertains to the seed of Abraham is about to be made clear and speak with volume. In other words, the seed of Abraham, the tabernacle of the Almighty Yahuah, will prove to be one and the same. We will witness, though we are many, we represent one seed, which is the seed of worship and obedience to the Almighty Father Yahuah, in Yahusha's name. Till next time, my brothers and sisters, pray on these matters. The things which seem simple, the things that we've taken for granted, have importance, very important applications during these end times. I, Symmanayah, I encourage you to continue to seek to earnestly discern what must and will be done as ordered by the Almighty Father Yahuah. I also invite you to examine what will soon come regarding white robes. I'm sure it will be a light to many. Till next time, I do bid you, O Yasharal, my brother, my sister, my family, Shalum.